I'm Dianne, 58 years old, and when my husband Jack died, he left our daughter Eleanor a beautiful home in Helena, Montana's capital. Meanwhile, I got a rundown cabin in the middle of nowhere. After 35 years of marriage, I felt betrayed, confused, and lost. I drove 800 miles to see this worthless inheritance, not knowing what to expect. When I finally got that rusty key in the lock and stepped inside, what I discovered changed everything. Before I tell you what I found in that forgotten cabin that changed everything, let me know where you're watching from today. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever had life throw you an unexpected curveball. I met Jack at my college roommate's wedding in 1985. I was 22, fresh out of college, with a teaching degree ready to shape young minds at Lincoln Elementary in our small Midwestern town. Jack was 30, impossibly handsome in his suit, with laugh lines around his eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He was standing alone by the punch bowl, looking slightly uncomfortable in the formal setting. "Not a fan of weddings?" I asked, reaching for a glass. "Not a fan of monkey suits," he replied, with a grin that made my heart flutter. Jack Harmon, civil engineer, friend of the groom. Dianne Williams, elementary teacher, friend of the bride. We talked through the entire reception. Jack had a quiet confidence and a mysterious air about him. He spoke about building bridges and infrastructure projects with passion, but whenever I asked about his background or family, he'd smoothly change the subject. There was something refreshingly different about him compared to the local boys I dated. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Jack would drive 3 hours each way just to take me to dinner. He'd send handwritten letters when he was away on construction projects. 6 months after meeting, he proposed on the banks of Lake Michigan with a simple gold band. "I can't promise you riches," he said, "but I can promise you'll never be bored." We settled in suburban Chicago, where Jack's engineering firm was based. We bought a modest 2-story home in a good school district. Jack's career flourished as he gained a reputation for innovative solutions to complex structural problems. I taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. Eleanor came along 3 years into our marriage. Our beautiful, headstrong daughter became the center of our universe. Jack was a devoted father, building elaborate tree houses and helping with science projects. Yet there remained parts of him that seemed walled off, especially when it came to his life before we met. The first time Jack mentioned his annual Montana trip was 5 years into our marriage. "I need to check on some family property," he said casually over dinner one evening. "Just a quick trip, a week or 2 at most." "Family property? You never mentioned owning property in Montana," I said, surprised. He shrugged. "Just an old cabin. Nothing special, but it needs maintenance." "Should Eleanor and I come with you? Make it a family vacation?" A shadow crossed his face. "Better not. It's pretty remote. No amenities for a child. Maybe when she's older." That was the pattern for the next 25 years. Every summer, Jack would disappear to Montana for 2 weeks. Every year, I'd suggest accompanying him. Every year, he'd have a reason why it wasn't practical. It became the one unspoken tension in our otherwise happy marriage. "Just my boring annual maintenance trip," he'd say, packing his old pickup truck with tools and supplies. I noticed he never took his usual clothes on these trips. Instead, he'd pack worn jeans and flannel shirts I never saw him wear in Chicago. He'd return sunburned, relaxed with a quiet contentment that gradually faded as he resumed his corporate life. Once in the early years, I pressed him about it. "Jack, it feels like you have a whole separate life out there that you're keeping from us. From me." He took my hands, his expression unusually vulnerable. "It's not another woman, if that's what you're worried about. It's just something I need. A connection to my past, to who I was before. Please trust me on this." I did trust him. Our marriage was strong in all the ways that mattered. We built a good life together, raising Eleanor to be independent and thoughtful. Jack attended every school play and soccer game. We hosted neighborhood barbecues and took family vacations to national parks. We saved for Eleanor's college fund and our retirement. Jack had just turned 60 and was talking about retiring in a few years when the heart attack hit. It was a Tuesday morning. He'd gone for his usual run. I was grading papers at the kitchen table when I heard a thud on the front porch. He'd managed to make it home before collapsing. The paramedics worked frantically, but he was pronounced dead at the hospital an hour later. The weeks that followed passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, well-meaning casseroles from neighbors, and paperwork. So much paperwork. I was numb going through the motions when Harold Winters, Jack's attorney, called, requesting a formal will reading. I didn't know Jack had a formal will, I told him, confused. We had simple wills drawn up years ago, leaving everything to each other. This is a separate document, Harold explained uncomfortably. Jack updated it annually. He asked that it only be revealed after his passing. The will reading was held in Harold's downtown office. Eleanor flew in from Seattle, where she worked as a software developer. She held my hand as Harold brought out a sealed envelope. "This is the last will and testament of Jack Arthur Harmon," Harold began formally, "executed and updated 6 months ago." What followed left me stunned. The Chicago house and most of our joint savings would go to Eleanor. I would receive a small stipend and sole ownership of the Montana property, the mysterious cabin he'd visited all those years. "There must be some mistake," I interrupted. "We always agreed everything would go to the survivor." Harold looked uncomfortable. Jack was very specific. He left this letter to explain. The letter, in Jack's familiar handwriting, was frustratingly vague. "Dianne, I know this seems unfair. The Montana property means more than you can imagine. Go there. You'll understand. All my love, Jack." Eleanor was as shocked as I was. "Dad left you a rundown cabin in the middle of nowhere. That's it." After 35 years, I couldn't answer. I felt betrayed, confused, and suddenly uncertain about the man I thought I knew completely. The tension in the car after the will reading was palpable. Eleanor drove us home in silence, occasionally glancing at me with concern. When we arrived at the house, now legally her house, she finally spoke. "Mom, you know you can stay here as long as you want. This will always be your home, too." Her kindness only made it worse. My 58-year-old pride rebelled at the thought of living in my daughter's house dependent on her charity. "Thank you, sweetheart, but I need some time to figure things out." That evening, our closest friends Barbara and Tom came over with dinner and sympathy. When I explained the situation, their confusion mirrored my own. "Jack left you a cabin in Montana, just the cabin?" Barbara asked incredulously. "Apparently so." "But why did he ever explain why these trips were so important?" Tom pressed. I shook my head. "He always said it was just a family responsibility, maintenance on an old property." "And you never went there, not once in 35 years. Barbara couldn't hide her surprise. "He always had reasons why it wasn't a good time." The explanation sounded hollow, even to my ears. That night, unable to sleep in the bed Jack and I had shared for decades, I began researching the mysterious property online. The address from the will placed it in northwestern Montana, near Kootenai National Forest. According to Google Maps, it was a 6-hour drive from Helena, on the edge of nowhere. The satellite view showed dense forest with a tiny structure barely visible through the trees. By morning, I'd made a decision. I would go see this place for myself. I needed answers that only the cabin might provide. Eleanor objected immediately. "Mom, you can't just drive to the wilderness by yourself. You don't even like camping." "I'll be fine. I need to do this, Eleanor. I need to understand why this place was so important to your father." "Then I'll come with you." "No," I said firmly. "This is something I need to do alone. Besides, you have to get back to Seattle." She reluctantly agreed to fly home as scheduled, extracting promises that I'd call regularly with updates. My friends were equally concerned. "At least take my GPS and satellite phone," Tom insisted, pressing the devices into my hands. "Cell service will be non-existent out there." I packed lightly. Some clothes, basic supplies, a flashlight, and the rusty key to the cabin I'd found among Jack's personal effects. I almost threw it away during the initial cleanup, thinking it was just an old keepsake. Now, it might be the key to understanding my husband's secret life. The drive from Chicago to Montana gave me too much time to think. As the Midwestern plains gave way to mountains, my emotions cycled between grief, anger, and nervous anticipation. Why had Jack kept this place so separate from our life together? What would I find there? Most painfully, had I ever truly known my husband? When I reached Helena, on the third day, I couldn't resist driving by the property Eleanor had inherited. It was a beautiful Victorian in the historic district recently restored according to the neighbors. Jack had apparently purchased it 5 years ago as an investment property. Another secret kept from me. Back on the highway heading northwest into increasingly remote territory, my resentment grew. Eleanor got a valuable home in a desirable location. I got what was probably a dilapidated shack in the woods. Was this Jack's final estimation of our respective worth to him? 6 hours later, I was thoroughly lost on unmarked forest roads. The GPS showed me approaching the property, but in the dense forest, every turnoff looked the same. With the sun beginning to set and my fuel gauge dipping, panic began to set in. I spotted a small general store with a single gas pump and pulled in gratefully. Inside, an older man with a gray beard looked up from his newspaper. "You look a bit turned around, ma'am." "I'm trying to find this address," I said, showing him the paper with the cabin's location. His eyebrows shot up in recognition. "You're looking for the Harmon place, up by Eagle Creek." "Yes," I replied, surprised. "Do you know it?" He studied me with a new interest. "Sure do. Jack stops in here every summer. Has for 25 years at least." He paused, realization dawning. "Wait, are you Jack's wife?" I nodded. He let out a low whistle. "So you're Jack Harmon's wife? Never thought he'd actually bring anyone out here." "He didn't bring me," I said tightly. "He died, heart attack, a month ago." The man's face fell. "I'm real sorry to hear that. Jack was, well, he was something special. Apparently everyone thought so except his wife." I couldn't help muttering. He gave me detailed directions and insisted I take a few extra supplies. "Road gets pretty rough up there." Refusing payment with a gruff, "Jack would have done the same for me." As I followed the winding dirt road into increasingly remote territory, the sun was setting behind the mountains. The forest pressed in from both sides, dark and primeval. Just when I thought I must have missed another turn, I spotted a weathered wooden sign nearly obscured by overgrowth, "Harmon." The narrow driveway curved through thick pine forest before opening to a small clearing. And there it was, my inheritance, a log cabin that had seen far better days. The porch sagged on one side, shutters hung askew. The roof appeared intact, but the whole structure had the neglected air of a place visited only occasionally. I sat in the car, tears suddenly streaming down my face. 35 years of marriage, and this was what Jack thought I deserved. A broken-down cabin in the middle of nowhere. As darkness fell completely, I gathered my courage and the rusty key I'd almost discarded. Whatever answers waited inside, I had come too far to turn back now. The front door resisted my efforts, swollen with moisture and age. I jiggled the key, pushed with my shoulder, and finally heard the satisfying click of the lock giving way. The door swung open with a protesting creak, releasing the musty smell of a long-closed space. I fumbled for a light switch, surprised when old-fashioned sconces on the walls actually illuminated. The cabin had electricity at least. As my eyes adjusted, I took in my surroundings with growing confusion. The cabin was a single room with a small addition that must have been a bathroom. A kitchenette occupied one corner with an ancient refrigerator and wood-burning stove. A full-size bed with a handmade quilt stood against the far wall. A sturdy wooden table and 2 chairs sat in the center of the room. Everything was dusty but not derelict. Signs of relatively recent habitation were everywhere. Canned goods in the cabinets were dated from last year. A generator hummed softly outside. There was even a battery-operated radio on a shelf. But what truly caught my attention were the personal touches that spoke unmistakably of Jack, a Jack I barely recognized. Flannel shirts and worn jeans hung from hooks by the door. Hiking boots far more rugged than anything I'd seen him wear in Chicago sat neatly beneath. On a bookshelf, titles about woodworking and nature stood alongside dog-eared paperback westerns, a genre I'd never known him to read. Most startling were the photographs. Framed snapshots showed a version of Jack I'd never met, dressed in flannel and denim, bearded during some years, standing proudly beside various woodworking projects. In one, he had his arm around an older man I didn't recognize, both of them holding fishing rods and grinning broadly beside a sun-dappled lake. I sank onto a handcrafted chair, my mind struggling to reconcile this evidence of a completely separate life with the husband I thought I knew. Who was this wilderness Jack? Why had he kept this version of himself hidden from me? As I moved through the small space touching his belongings, opening drawers, I felt like an intruder in my husband's secret life. In the bedside table, I found a leather-bound journal well worn from years of handling. Opening it felt like an invasion of privacy, yet Jack had sent me here, presumably knowing I would find it. The first entry was dated 26 years ago. Returned to Montana after all these years. Thomas was right. This place heals something in me that Chicago never touches. The forest, the silence, the work of my hands instead of my mind. Dianne wouldn't understand this part of me. How could she? I've never shown it to her. I felt a pang of hurt and anger. He'd never even given me the chance to understand. Page after page chronicled his annual retreats, his growing mastery of woodworking, his friendship with someone named Thomas, who appeared to have been a mentor. Jack wrote of the split in his soul, successful engineer versus rural craftsman, and his inability to reconcile these two selves. I should tell Dianne about this place, about this work that feels more like me than anything I do in Chicago. But after hiding it for so many years, how do I explain? And what if she hates it here? What if she thinks my work is worthless? Better to keep these worlds separate than risk losing either. As I read deeper into the night, my anger gradually gave way to sadness. Jack had created this division not out of malice, but out of insecurity and fear. He had compartmentalized his life so completely that even he couldn't find a way to bridge the gap he'd created. Around midnight, I noticed something unusual about the floor. A rug in the center of the room didn't quite lie flat, as if something was beneath it. Pulling it back revealed a trap door with a small padlock. On Jack's keyring, I found a small key that fit perfectly. I hesitated before opening it. What other secrets was I about to discover? Taking a deep breath, I lifted the trapdoor to find a sturdy wooden staircase leading down into darkness. A light switch at the top illuminated what lay below, and I gasped in shock. The cellar was no primitive storage space, but a sophisticated workshop, clean and organized, with professional tools arranged on pegboards. A massive workbench dominated the center, its surface smooth from years of use. The contrast with the neglected cabin above couldn't have been more striking. Most astonishing were the pieces of furniture in various stages of completion. A rocking chair with intricate carvings along its arms. A chest of drawers with inlaid wood creating a mountain landscape. A dining table whose legs had been shaped to resemble tree trunks so lifelike I had to touch them to confirm they were wooden. Each piece showed extraordinary craftsmanship far beyond hobbyist level. On a completed cabinet, I found a small brass plate, J.H. Montana Originals, burned into the wood beside it. My husband's signature on work I never knew he created. I stood in that hidden workshop surrounded by evidence of Jack's passion and talent, and felt the foundations of my understanding shift. This wasn't just a dilapidated cabin in the woods. It was the place where Jack had expressed a side of himself he'd never shared with me. And now, for reasons I still didn't understand, he had left it to me. I returned to the main cabin just before dawn, emotionally exhausted from my discoveries. With Jack's journal in hand, I curled up on the bed that smelled faintly of pine, and his aftershave determined to understand the full story. The early entries described how Jack had come to own this property. Thomas Bennett had been his mother's brother, a master furniture maker who recognized similar talent in young Jack. When Jack was 17, his parents divorced bitterly. He spent that summer with Thomas in Montana learning woodworking basics and healing from family trauma. Thomas showed me how to listen to the wood, Jack wrote, how each piece has its own story to tell if you're patient enough to hear it. Engineering is about forcing material to do what you want. Woodworking is about partnership with the material. Both require precision, but only one requires humility. Over the years, Thomas became the father figure Jack needed, teaching him traditional techniques and encouraging his natural talent. When Thomas died without children of his own, he left the cabin and surrounding land to Jack then, a 25-year-old engineering student. I should have dropped everything and moved here permanently, Jack wrote, but I had student loans, a promising career ahead in Chicago, and a practical nature that couldn't justify abandoning security for art. Thomas would have understood, but he would have been disappointed too. Jack had kept the property visiting when he could during college and early career. Then he met me, fell in love, and faced a dilemma how to introduce his engineering girlfriend to his secret, artistic side. Dianne is everything I want, smart, kind, grounded, but she fell for engineering Jack. What if woodworker Jack disappoints her? What if she thinks this cabin is primitive, this land worthless, this passion impractical? Better to keep it separate, at least for now. That, for now, stretched into years, then decades. The longer he waited, the harder it became to bridge his divided life. He convinced himself I wouldn't appreciate this place or understand his work. Meanwhile, his talent flourished during his annual retreats. Created a dining set this summer that Thomas would have been proud of. A gallery owner in Missoula saw photos and wants to represent my work. Had to decline. Can't risk someone connecting J.H. Montana with Jack Harmon of Chicago. Still, the validation means something. Later entries revealed his growing recognition in crafting circles despite his insistence on anonymity. Pieces signed simply J.H. began appearing in high-end Montana galleries and private collections sold through Thomas's old contacts. Jack never took money for his work, instead directing payments to a scholarship fund for rural Montana students studying traditional crafts. As Jack approached retirement age, his entries showed increasing resolve to finally unite his dual lives. It's time. Next summer, I'll bring Dianne to the cabin. I'll show her the workshop, the lake, the 50 acres that have been my sanctuary. Eleanor, too, though I suspect she'll see only wilderness where I see paradise. I've begun renovation plans to make the cabin more comfortable. By next year, it will be ready, with more secrets. The final entry was dated just 2 months before his heart attack. Architectural plans approved today. Construction begins in spring. By summer, this place will be worthy of Dianne. I've lived too long divided. Retirement is the chance to finally be whole. At the back of the journal, I found an envelope addressed simply, Dianne. With trembling hands, I opened it to find a letter written in Jack's distinctive script. My dearest Dianne, if you're reading this, I never got the chance to show you Montana myself. I'm sorry for that, sorrier than I can express. This cabin holds the part of me I never had the courage to share with you, not because I didn't trust your love, but because I didn't trust my own worth. The cabin looks rough now, I know, but the land is beautiful. 50 acres, including the pine forest and the small lake beyond the North Trail. I've filed plans to renovate, to make it a place where we could spend retirement together. Those plans are in the workshop along with the furniture I've created over the years. I've left the Helena house to Eleanor because she needs security structure property she can easily sell or rent. She's practical like engineering Jack. But you, despite your organized teacher exterior, have an artist's soul. You see beauty in unexpected places. You'll understand this land, this work in ways she never could. This place isn't the lesser inheritance. It's the most precious thing I had to give, the truest part of myself. I hope you can forgive my silence all these years. I hope you can see what I saw in this place. All my love, Jack. Morning light was streaming through the windows as I finished reading. I wiped tears from my face and stepped outside to see Jack's land in daylight. The cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. A narrow path led away from the back porch. Following it, I discovered what Jack had described: a pristine mountain lake, its surface reflecting the blue sky and surrounding peaks. On its shore stood a simple bench, clearly Jack's handiwork. The view was breathtaking, worth far more than any city property in emotional value, if not dollars. My phone rang unexpectedly. I'd found a pocket of cell service near the lake. Eleanor's worried voice came through. "Mom, I've been trying to reach you for hours. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Eleanor, just processing." "What's it like? Is it as bad as we thought?" I hesitated, not ready to share my discoveries. "It's different than expected. I need some time here." "Time, Mom? What are you talking about? That place is literally in the middle of nowhere. Just take some pictures and come back. We'll sell it." "I'm not ready to discuss selling," I said firmly. "I'll call you tomorrow." I ended the call before she could argue further. I wasn't ready to explain what I'd found. Not just the workshop and furniture, but this glimpse into the husband I thought I knew completely. I needed to understand it myself first. After a simple breakfast from the canned goods in the cabin, I gathered photographs of Jack's furniture and drove into town. The general store owner, who introduced himself as Bill, directed me to Carolyn Fisher, an antique dealer who knows about such things. Carolyn's shop occupied a Victorian storefront on the town's short main street. Wind chimes tinkled as I entered, navigating through crowded aisles of furniture and collectibles. "Be right with you," called a voice from the back. A woman in her 60s emerged, wire-rimmed glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck. Her gray hair was cut in a practical bob, and her hands showed the character of someone who worked with them. "I'm looking for information about these pieces," I said, laying out the photos I'd taken in Jack's workshop. Carolyn put on her glasses and went completely still. Her finger hovered over the maker's mark visible in one image. "Where did you get these?" she asked, her voice suddenly tense. "My husband made them. Jack Harmon. He recently passed away." "Jack Harmon," she repeated, looking up sharply. "You're J.H.'s wife." "The J.H.?" I nodded, startled by her intensity. "My dear, do you have any idea what you've inherited?" Without waiting for an answer, she led me to a glass cabinet at the rear of the store. Inside was a small side table with the distinctive J.H. Montana original signature. This piece sold at auction in Missoula 3 years ago for $22,000. I had to outbid an interior designer from Seattle and a collector from San Francisco. She looked at me with new respect. "Your husband was considered one of the finest woodworkers in the Northwest. His pieces are incredibly rare and highly sought after." $22,000 for a side table. I couldn't hide my shock. J.H. pieces appear so rarely on the market that collectors go crazy when they surface. She studied me carefully. Most people assumed J.H. was an old recluse, possibly someone who'd been working since the 70s. No one knew his real identity. "I didn't know either," I admitted. "Not until yesterday." At her questioning look, I gave a condensed version of discovering Jack's secret workshop. "So he was a civil engineer in Chicago with a secret life as a master craftsman in Montana," she marveled. "That explains why he only produced a few pieces each year." "How many pieces are out there?" "Perhaps 50 that I know of, each one unique, most in private collections or galleries." She made a phone call, and within the hour I was speaking with Gregory Palmer, owner of Mountain Heritage Gallery in Missoula. "Mrs. Harmon, I can't express how excited I am to speak with you," he gushed after I explained who I was. "I've been selling your husband's work for 15 years without ever meeting him face to face. His pieces always came through Thomas Bennett initially, then through mutual contacts after Thomas passed." "You never met Jack?" Never. He insisted on anonymity, said he had another life that needed to stay separate. We all assumed he was some eccentric genius who couldn't handle publicity. Gregory confirmed what Carolyn had told me about the value of Jack's work. If you have unfinished or unseen pieces, I'd be honored to host an exhibition. The art world will be fascinated by this revelation about JH's identity. My head spinning with this information, I next visited the county records office. The property deed showed that Jack had inherited 50 acres from Thomas Bennett in 1982 and had paid off a small remaining mortgage 10 years ago. The land value assessment was surprisingly high due to the lakefront footage and pristine forest. More shocking were the renovation permits Jack had filed 3 months before his death. The plans stored in his workshop were comprehensive: expanded living space, modern kitchen proper septic system, solar panels for sustainable electricity. He'd already put down deposits with a local contractor. I called the contractor listed on the permits. Brad Wilson remembered Jack well. Jack was finally going to fix that place up proper, Brad told me during a site visit the next day. Said it was time to make it a real home, not just a summer camp. Brad walked around the cabin, checking the foundation and structure. Looks worse than it is. The bones are solid. Jack used quality materials when he built that workshop. We can work with this, follow through on his plans if you want. What would it cost to complete the renovation? I asked. He named a figure that was substantial, but not impossible given what I'd learned about the value of Jack's furniture. I'd need to update some of the estimates since material costs have risen, he added, but we could start as soon as you give the word. I thanked him and promised to be in touch soon. Back at the cabin, I viewed everything with fresh eyes. The sagging porch, the outdated kitchenette, the cramped living space. All of it was temporary. Jack had planned to transform this place before revealing it to me. In the workshop, I examined the unfinished pieces with new appreciation. Even to my untrained eye, the craftsmanship was extraordinary. The way Jack had coaxed curves from rigid wood, the subtle gradations in color from his careful selection of natural materials, the seamless joints that looked grown rather than constructed, all spoke of true artistry. I ran my fingers over a half-completed rocking chair, feeling the satiny smoothness where he had worked and the rougher surfaces waiting for his touch. A touch that would never come. "Oh, Jack," I whispered to the empty workshop, "why didn't you show me this side of yourself? Did you really think I wouldn't understand?" The next morning, I was organizing Jack's tools when I heard a car approaching. Through the window, I saw an unfamiliar SUV with rental tags pulling into the clearing. Eleanor stepped out, looking out of place in her Seattle business casual against the wilderness backdrop. "Mom," she called, striding toward the cabin with determination. "Why haven't you been answering your phone? I've been worried sick." I opened the door, suddenly self-conscious about my appearance. I'd been wearing the same clothes for days, my hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "Cell service is spotty up here. I told you I'd call." I stepped aside to let her enter. "What are you doing here? I thought you had meetings this week." "I rescheduled. Someone needed to check on you." She looked around the cabin's interior with poorly concealed dismay. "Oh, Mom, this place is even worse than I imagined. You can't seriously be staying here." "It's not as bad as it looks," I began, but she was already moving through the space cataloging its deficiencies. "No insulation, ancient plumbing. Is that a wood stove? This whole place is probably a fire hazard." She turned to me with concern. "Please tell me you're coming back with me today. We can call a real estate agent to deal with this shack." "Eleanor, there's something you need to see first." I led her to the trapdoor still open from my morning work in the workshop. A basement in a cabin. She followed me down the stairs reluctantly, then stopped short at the sight of the workshop. "What is all this?" "Your father's work. His real work, as it turns out." Eleanor moved slowly among the furniture pieces, touching them with cautious fingers. She stopped at a completed desk with J.H. Montana Originals burned into its surface. "J.H.," she repeated. "Dad was J.H., the furniture maker." I nodded, surprised. You know about JH. My boss has one of his tables, paid a fortune for it at a gallery in Seattle. She looked around with new eyes. Dad made these, my dad the engineer. I showed her the journal. The letter explained everything I'd learned over the past few days. Eleanor listened in stunned silence, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. So this worthless cabin isn't worthless at all, she finally said. The land, the workshop, the furniture, it's all valuable. It's not about the monetary value, Eleanor. It's about who your father really was. This place held the part of him he never showed us, the artist behind the engineer. But why hide it? Why keep it secret? It doesn't make sense. He was afraid we wouldn't understand, that we'd think less of him somehow. I sighed. He was planning to show us after retirement. The heart attack came before he could. Eleanor picked up a small jewelry box, examining its perfect joinery. I never knew he could do anything like this. It's beautiful. Yes, it is. We climbed back upstairs, the mood between us shifting. Eleanor paced the small cabin, looking out the windows at the forest beyond. So what now? She finally asked. You can't possibly be thinking of staying here. Actually, I am. At least for a while. Mom, be reasonable. You're 58 years old. You have a life in Chicago, friends, your teaching job. This place is hours from civilization. Winters here must be brutal. Jack filed renovation plans before he died. I've talked to the contractor. The cabin can be transformed into something quite comfortable. Eleanor looked at me like I'd lost my mind. You're seriously considering renovating this place, living here? That's insane. Is it? Your father left this to me specifically because he thought I'd appreciate it in a way you wouldn't. So sell it. Sell the furniture, sell the land. Between this property and the Helena house, we could both be very comfortable. This isn't about money, Eleanor. Everything is about money eventually, Mom. Be practical. Her tone had the same patronizing edge Jack's letter had predicted. Look, I get that you're grieving, that you're fascinated by discovering Dad's secret hobby. It wasn't a hobby. It was his passion, his art. Fine, his art. But you need to think rationally. You have no experience with property development, with rural living, with isolation. This isn't you. Her words stung because they echoed my own doubts. Was I being irrational? Making decisions based on emotional revelations rather than practical considerations. I need time to think. I said finally. I'm not rushing into anything, but I'm not dismissing it either. Eleanor threw up her hands in frustration. I don't understand you right now. This isn't the practical mother who made me call when I'd be late coming home, who budgeted our family vacations to the penny, who taught me to always have a 5-year plan. Maybe I'm discovering there's more to me than that person, I replied quietly. Just like there was more to your father than the man we thought we knew. This is ridiculous. I'm not leaving you here alone in this wilderness. I'm not alone. I've met people in town. The contractor checks in daily. I'm fine, Eleanor. Our argument continued, growing more heated as Eleanor listed all the practical reasons I should return to Chicago immediately and logical arguments for selling both properties. I found myself defending a position I wasn't even sure I fully believed in yet. Finally, Eleanor grabbed her purse. I have a room at the lodge in town. I'll give you overnight to come to your senses. We'll talk again tomorrow when you've had time to think rationally. After she left, I sat on the porch emotionally drained. Eleanor's reaction was exactly what Jack had feared from both of us, a practical dismissal of something deeply meaningful to him. Had I reacted the same way if he'd shown me this place years ago, I wanted to believe I would have understood, but Eleanor's reaction made me less certain. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the small cabin feeling conflicted. My teaching job in Chicago, my friends, my comfortable suburban life, all waited for my return. The practical choice was obvious. Sell everything. Buy a nice condo in Chicago, live comfortably on the proceeds. Around midnight, I wandered down to the workshop again. In a corner, I noticed something I'd overlooked, a stack of beautiful hardwood boards with a handwritten note attached for your own creations. Jack had anticipated that I might want to try woodworking myself. The thought was absurd. I was an elementary school teacher, not an artist. Yet something compelled me to pick up a piece of sandpaper from the workbench and feel the grain of one maple board beneath my fingers. The wood was warm alive in a way I hadn't expected. As I ran my hands over its surface, I remembered how Jack's journal described listening to the wood. On impulse, I sat at the workbench and began gently sanding the board, feeling its character emerge beneath my fingers. I lost track of time, absorbed in the simple meditative task. When I finally looked up, sunlight was streaming through the small basement windows. I had spent the entire night working with my hands, and something fundamental had shifted inside me. I called my principal at Lincoln Elementary that morning and requested extended bereavement leave. I need more time to settle my husband's affairs in Montana, I explained, possibly through the end of the semester. Then I called Eleanor at her hotel. I'm staying at least for now. I need to see this through to understand what your father loved about this place. Mom, please, she began. This isn't up for debate, Eleanor. I'm a grown woman making my own choice. I hope you can respect that even if you don't understand it. After a long pause, she sighed. Promise you'll stay safe. Promise you'll call if you need anything. I promise. She returned to the cabin later that day for a tense goodbye. As she was leaving, she paused at her car. Dad left me the practical inheritance and you the meaningful one. Maybe he understood us both better than we realized. It was the first indication that she might eventually come to accept my decision. 6 months later, the cabin was unrecognizable. Following Jack's plans with some modifications of my own, Brad and his crew had transformed the space into a beautiful home that honored its rustic origins while providing modern comfort. The renovation expanded the main living area with walls of windows overlooking the lake. The kitchenette became a proper kitchen with simple but quality appliances. A master bedroom suite replaced the original sleeping area with a stone fireplace that served both bedroom and living room. The workshop remained largely untouched, a sanctuary below. True to Jack's vision, the house blended with its surroundings, the new cedar siding weathering to match the original structure. Solar panels provided electricity, supplemented by a more efficient generator. Satellite internet connected me to the outside world when I wanted it. The most surprising development was my own growing skill with woodworking. Under the guidance of Robert Kincaid, an older craftsman who had known Thomas Bennett, I began learning the basics of Jack's art. You have good hands, Robert observed during our third lesson. Patient hands. Most beginners rush. My first completed project was almost laughably simple, a small cutting board with slightly uneven edges. But the satisfaction of creating something tangible was unlike anything I'd experienced in decades of teaching. From there, I progressed to simple boxes, then a footstool, each project a little more ambitious than the last. Meanwhile, Gregory Palmer organized a showing of Jack's work at his Missoula gallery. The revealed works of J.H. Montana attracted collectors from across the country, generating press coverage that told Jack's unusual story. I attended the opening, sharing memories of the husband I knew, while acknowledging the parts of him I was still discovering. 3 pieces sold for prices that confirmed everything Carolyn had told me about the value of Jack's work. The proceeds, along with the sale of our Chicago house, ensured I could live comfortably while completing the cabin renovations. Eleanor remained skeptical, but gradually softened her opposition. In monthly phone calls, her questions evolved from, "When are you coming to your senses?" to, "How are the renovations going?" to eventually, "Do you think I could visit this summer?" Our relationship healed slowly as she began to understand my choice wasn't a rejection of the life we'd shared, but an embracing of something new. When she finally visited with her husband Michael in August, I saw her truly see the beauty of the place for the first time. "I get it now," she said as we sat on the lakeside bench Jack had built. "It's not what I would choose, but I can see why you stayed." On a crisp October morning, I was drinking coffee on my new deck when Gregory Palmer called with unexpected news. The Bennington Museum of American Craft wants to include 3 of Jack's pieces in their Masters of Wood exhibition. It's a tremendous honor. Only 12 artisans from across the country are being featured. Jack would have been embarrassed by the attention, I laughed, but proud too, I think. After we hung up, I walked the now familiar trail to the lake. The aspen trees were turning golden, their leaves shimmering in the morning light. I sat on Jack's bench reflecting on how completely my life had changed in 6 months. The elementary school teacher from suburban Chicago was gone. In her place was a woman who split firewood for her stove, who knew her neighbors in the small Montana town by name, who spent hours in a workshop coaxing beauty from raw timber. A woman who had discovered facets of herself she never knew existed, much like she had discovered new dimensions of her husband after his death. In a small clearing near the lake, I had created a simple memorial to Jack. Not a grave. His ashes were scattered here according to his wishes, but a place of remembrance marked by a cherry wood bench. I had made myself my first major project. The joints weren't perfect, the proportions not quite right, but I had made it with my own hands, and that made it meaningful in a way my previous achievements never had been. I had finally begun to understand what Jack had found here. Not an escape from our life together, but a dimension of himself that completed the picture. He had been wrong to keep it separate, but I had come to forgive that mistake, as I experienced the transformative power of this place myself. In the workshop, waiting for final sanding and finishing, sat my most ambitious project yet, a jewelry box, similar to ones Jack had made, but with my own design elements. Inside the lid, I had carefully burned my own maker's mark, D.H. Montana Continued. Not an imitation of Jack's work, but a continuation of what he had begun. Not a replacement for my previous life, but an evolution into something I never expected to become. Like the wood I was learning to shape, I too was revealing my hidden grain, discovering patterns that had always existed beneath the surface waiting to emerge. Have you ever discovered something unexpected about a loved one after they were gone? Or found a new side to yourself after loss forced you to take a different path? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of rediscovery resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might need to hear that sometimes what looks like an ending can actually be an invitation to a new beginning. Thank you for joining me on this unexpected journey, and remember that it's never too late to discover new dimensions of yourself, even in the most unlikely places.